Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another exciting edition of the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and I'm joined today by Mr. Hermann Pretorius. Hermann, how are you?
I am fine, thanks. And yourself, Nick?
I'm very well, thank you. And Mr. Terence Corrigan. Terence, how are you?
I'm good, Nick. I'm good.
I look forward to your wisdom on yet another rainy, cloudy day up in Joburg.
Are there any others lately?
Yeah, no, we've had an unusually cold summer, I would say, which is a little bit unusual. But anyway, let's get stuck into it. I guess maybe it's sort of spiritually representing where the nation's at now, a sort of grey ominence. Anyway, so we were talking a little bit before the show about sort of COVID and how its tail might be quite long. So I think a lot of countries have been hoping for what they call the V-shaped recovery, and that is where the economy falls over due to something like COVID, and then it shoots back up almost immediately. And in the first world, especially in the US, and I think to some degree in the UK, we've seen some evidence that this may in fact be the case. I think it's been interrupted by the second wave, but generally speaking, it looks like a lot of countries around the world are going to bounce back, at least fairly quickly. I think the US is estimating that unemployment will be as low as it was before the pandemic, which was extraordinarily low, in sort of 2 or 3 years' time, barring no major changes, which is pretty good news for them. Unfortunately, South Africa is not so fortunate, or may not be so fortunate. So we've seen quite a lot of damage from COVID, from lockdowns, from the disease itself, suppressing demand, that kind of thing. Greyhound, the bus company, will close its operations in February 2021 after 37 years of operating in the country. They're offering refunds to anyone who's purchased a ticket, and they thanked customers for their support over the years. They said that up until February 2020, they were doing all right. Sorry, they said that before the pandemic they were doing all right, but it's just basically finished them off. Ster-Kinekor, the movie theater chain, the cinema chain, they look like they're going under. They say that they've turned around from being profitable to being completely unprofitable. They're looking at going to business rescue now. Musica is closing down. Domino's Pizza. So things are not looking great at all. A lot of long-established South African institutions and businesses look like they're going to go down in this pandemic, which is, of course, not good news. And unfortunately, there is help on the way, but not from a source that I think we want. And this, in this case, is Trade and Industry and Competition Minister Minister Patel. It said the government is doing its best to build and stimulate growth for local companies amid the COVID-19 pandemic, and that they will be focusing on increasing local trade. He said, we sat down with business community and identified more than 40 major products that with retailers and others we're going to significantly localize from South African-based firms, and government itself is revamping our own procurement to try and buy more locally. Terence, is Minister Patel going to rescue the economy?
Well, just listening to that, my response was blah, blah, blah. This is the kind of thing we've heard before, again and again and again, and it's all based, I think, on a faulty set of assumptions. There's Peter Bruce has actually taken this up. The idea that you force all scrap metal to be processed in South Africa. Well, what is the market for those goods? How profitably can you sell them? If you're forcing suppliers to sell at some sort of discount, what incentive does it create to them? And then also there's a subsidiary question of people who are selling this stuff to consumers abroad. They get to take a knock. I think I'm afraid that the minister, and I think it applies to some of his predecessors, have this idea of the economy as a sort of board of buttons and levers where you can sort of set things to your desired setting, and somehow you get out the product that you want.
We all remember the infamous rotisserie chicken banning and the open-toed shoes and stuff during the COVID lockdown.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the industrialists program, buy local is nothing new. In fact, it's not even post '94. I remember, and I date myself here. I remember watching the TV in the 1980s, and they had this series of "If we love South Africa, we must buy South African." Remember, there was this lovely flower lady in Cape Town who used to do like one of the most memorable slots on that. You know. There are reasons why we get soaked by imports. That's because they're generally cheaper. What makes them cheaper? Remember that by the time they hit the shore here, they've been sent. There's transport costs and whatever, labor costs, the costs of internal logistics, regulatory costs. The government seems to be willing to do everything, absolutely everything, to stimulate the economy, apart from anything that will actually have an impact. So, red tape is pretty much, we talk about it. We don't really do anything. It's one of the, it's a discussion point. Everyone says get rid of red tape until you actually say, well, snip that regulation. That's, civilization will end. Labor regulation, minimum wages, and everything off the table. In fact, the restaurant industry has just been gifted with new requirements. The restaurant industry, words fail me. Very few other sectors have taken the type of battering, but yes, let's push their costs up. I think 16% or something. You're really just not serious when your appeal to potential investors, and I mean local investors too, not just foreign guys, is that we're going to be having an infrastructure build. So sooner or later, we will have trains that run on time, and it can actually fit into the tunnels and things like that. Look, at the moment you have to bring your own infrastructure, your generators and everything, but don't worry, we are going to be taking stern action against managers who don't do what they're supposed to. Once again, we've ever heard that before. No, and we've got this little basket of incentives. It's more like a kind of cookie jar, which provided you're very good and you give the right contracts to the right people, you can sort of take a little subsidy or something. It's like, why bother? What you want is an environment where people can actually make a profit, where they don't fear that their stuff is going to be seized, where the government can actually maintain law and order. You're not subjected to your construction mafias, or even worse, your local political strongmen. That is what we need. The 700-page plan, to be replaced 2 years later by the 900-page plan, and then the super duper, you bet amazing 1,000-page plan. You talk about, okay, there's this, and you say, okay, well, there's 40 products. Wow, okay. Say, if you're talking about 40 priorities, you don't have any priorities. It's right. No, I mean, this is it's just that they've got it all backwards.
Right. And we can see how much regulation is really just crushing stuff in this country. Once again, I go back to mining, where South Africa has very few of the world's new projects that are going to sort of come on in the pipeline, despite the fact that we have still some of the largest mineral reserves in the world. And in fact, miners, obviously, some are choosing to invest in places like Australia, which, you can kind of understand quite obviously why they want to invest there over South Africa. But even other countries in Africa, which have worse infrastructure, which in some cases have worse governments and rule of law and that kind of stuff, companies are investing there because at least the regulatory burden is not so absolutely crushing, and the government isn't so hostile to business. Hermann, Minister Patel, I've heard people say it's been said before that he was responsible through overregulation of killing the textiles industry in South Africa. Do you think he's going to apply that track record to the whole economy now? I mean, more so than he already has.
Well, yes. Well, he might try. The thing is that it was Reagan who said the 9 most terrifying words in the English language is "I'm from the government. I'm here to help," and that sort of sums up.
Sorry, can I just jump in here? I do think that that's generally true, but there is also a difference between the Swiss government saying that to you and the South African government saying that to you.
Yes. No, absolutely, and I think that you might even adapt that quote to make it even more terrifying. Is "Hi, I'm Hermann Patel. I'm here to help." I mean that's just that's a horror film just waiting to happen if we still have a film industry. But the thing is that, and it's exactly the point that Terence made, that people who don't understand the economy and think it's a switchboard and it's a machine that you can, bypass this bit or something. The economy is much closer to an ecosystem than it is to a machine. In the sense that if you are going to say, lions, how about you don't eat for 3 weeks? You're not going to just have, okay, lions are going to lose a bit of weight. The complexity of the system is almost infinite, because what the South African economy is, it is the daily decisions of 60 million people, how they are going to spend their time and how they are going to spend their talents. And that's the complexity of the system we are here. Now, if you think that you're looking at the daily life choices of 60 million people and you think, we are going to get 40 products, we're going to manufacture them locally, and that's going to make a difference, then you are fundamentally ignorant as to the complexity of the thing you are dealing with. And that's not even starting to look at the problem that localized, synthetically localized production makes stuff more expensive, not less expensive. It doesn't help you. It's the one thing I'm not an ordo-liberal when it comes to the economy, but I have a lot of time for Ludwig Erhard, who was Konrad Adenauer's Minister for the Economy, who is widely credited with the Wirtschaftswunder after the Second World War, where West Germany, within 10, 15 years, went from utter destruction to a world-leading economy. And what Erhard understood is that, or you must make your policies consumer-based. He had this whole idea of consumer-based free market capitalism. And part of that, he had a weird, idea about natural monopolies. And if there's a natural monopoly, the state should take that natural monopoly and make the monopolists behave as if they are in a competitive market. And those are funky ideas that I don't quite buy into. But the thing that Erhard really understood is consumer-based market policies. You cannot try to make stuff more expensive, screw over your consumer, and think that that will improve your economy. If anything, what you want to do is make your consumer as rich as possible and make stuff as good, goods and services as cheap as possible for your consumer. And that is the opposite of protectionism. That is, sometimes you can protect certain things, but the real heart of what you need to try and do is build purchasing power. If you want to get an economy going, that's the thing you need to do, because what the difference between a dead economy and a growing one isn't the size of the demand or really the size of the supply. It's the purchasing power that can connect these two things. I mean, if you look at the poorest areas in South Africa, massive demand for a lot of things. But why don't they get things? Because they don't have purchasing power. So if you want to get an economy going, it's about how can you ensure that you have a gradual building upwards of, an income exchange gain type of situation where people can monetize their skills and increasingly, organically and sustainably build their purchasing power to participate in the economy. And identifying 40 products that you're now going to produce locally is just, I'm almost tempted to say that, what's it, crop bottoms and the banning of open-toe sandals. I'm almost tempted to say that has more of a meritorious basis than identifying 40 products for local production and think, solved it.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact figure, but France, before the pandemic, actually asked me to look into just how many pages of economic plans have been written, mostly by Minister Patel, because he's been, sort of around trade and industry and various parts. He's been in cabinet for a lot of the last 2 decades. And there's an awful lot that's been written and very little has come of it. So, Terence, any final thoughts before we move on?
I think that one of the smartest comments I ever read on the economy and on state intervention, I can't remember who said it. It could actually have been Peter Bruce, is that sectors do not export, firms do. It was in the context of some export promotion thing. I think that you can apply that throughout the system. And I think that we have an economic policy framework that's firmly rooted in the abstract. That
Right.
If we can press this button and incentivize this behavior in this sector and whatever, at the same time while keeping a boot heel on real world firms and actual business people, somehow this all worked out, but it's completely backwards.
Right.
And I just want to say a last thing, Nick, is that in the Financial Mail today, there's the editorial laments the absence of the leadership of Minister Patel. And they say here that, early on in the lockdown, he was much maligned for the silliness of crop bottoms and roast chicken sales and stuff like that. And then I'm just like, how could you want more of Ebrahim Patel? I mean, what's your definition of a problem if your solution is more Ebrahim Patel? If government could stop doing 50% of what it's doing today, tomorrow, without wanting to sound too much like Alistair Sparks, but tomorrow could be a better country. It's really not. It's not about getting government to do more. It's really just about government to do less. I mean, really, just stop doing stupid things. Stop. If there's, it's just so annoying. I just can't read the Financial Mail and people go, yes, industry is suffering. Where's Patel? We need him. I mean, please just let's go on. I'm having a slight meltdown.
So yeah, no, I must say there is something amusing that the supposed bastions of capitalism are so often leading the charge in attacking it and declaring that capitalism has failed, which is rather annoying, particularly because what we have now is, I wouldn't call it proper capitalism. Anyway, let us go on to another minister who is much praised and perhaps without merit behind it, and that is, of course, Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan, who, especially by some of Media 24, is treated as though he's the second coming of Christ. He has said now that he's going to take on. He's had enough of load shedding, and that there are going to be greater consequences now for power station managers over power cuts. Gordhan briefed MPs on the current status of SOEs yesterday. He said that it was good that Eskom had a new head of generation, but he said those in operations would face greater consequences if performance was not met as load shedding happened. He said, secondly, they are going to enforce new standards of operational conduct and rigor as far as power station operations are concerned. Thirdly, there's going to be a lot more consequence management if different performance standards are not met. So I think there's two ways you can interpret this. One, the more sort of charitable way is he's saying, look, if you don't do your job properly, you're going to be fired, which is welcome. That's exactly what we need in South Africa. However, this can also very easily be read as, if you let the lights go off, we'll fire you. Now, Hermann, am I right in saying that that's kind of the short-term thinking that got us into this mess? Deprioritizing maintenance, and that's caused our infrastructure to decay a huge amount. I know that was a huge problem in the city of Joburg, where I was a DA ward councillor for a bit. a lot of electricity problems in the city happened simply because there were certain points the depot managers told us where they said, you have no money for maintenance, so just do emergency maintenance. There's no pre-planned maintenance because we want to keep the power on. And,
yes, no, absolutely, Nick. That is. It's so frustrating because, yes, there was this brief period during the Zuma years when there was this interruption of load shedding where we didn't have it. But, in retrospect, it has become clear that was because they just said, no, don't worry about maintenance. Just if you have to, use chewing gum to connect Madupi to the grid, do it. If you have to, position a child over the coal to keep it dry, just do it. Just this short term. My metaphors are becoming quite
interesting
extreme.
Ideas about how a power station works there, Hermann.
Yes, I think it's because I've been really
only
paying
February,
attention to. Yes, but the thing here is that I saw the story and I sent it to you, and I thought this is something we should talk about. And my immediate reaction to this was to think of Dyatlov. It was Dyatlof's fault. He was the engineer in charge of Chernobyl, and he was ultimately Dyatlov, Hermann, and some other guy were the fall guys for the collapse and the disaster of Chernobyl.
Comrade Pretorius, what are you saying? South African reactors don't melt down.
Yes,
that is the party line. There's this.
They just go offline.
Yeah, they just.
Yes,
yeah.
The system is down.
For a while, Chernobyl had way too much power.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, they didn't flatten the curve. But
if they just had a battery.
Yes, it just struck me because firstly, Pravin Gordhan, card-carrying communist for much of his life. Then he comes out with, you Dyatlov and comrades for mean. If your power station failures, it would be a shame if something happened to you. Meanwhile, the real problem is not at that level. That's not where the meltdown is. It's very similar to how the Russian government, took a few apparatchiks at a lower level and said, yes, that's their fault. Therefore, we are going to make an example of them. What has gone wrong? Let's make clear. What has gone wrong at Eskom is station management, amongst other things. But that's a consequence of cadre deployment. That's a consequence of government policy from top to bottom. It's not as if a sudden, these power stations would function perfectly if they only had, stronger enforcement mechanisms. That's just not fundamentally. That's not what has gone wrong. And I wonder if we can call this episode, just I can't remember of 2 commies and a bull, because we've got Patel and now we've got Gordhan, and yes, they identify a problem, but then they just go mad and miss the solution. And that's what really stood out to me on this thing. It's just, no matter how you interpret it, it doesn't come close to fixing the underlying
problem. There's lots of action, but not much improvement. Terence, of the 2 interpretations I gave, the more charitable and the less charitable, which one do you think here Gordhan is more likely to be the result of what Gordhan is saying?
Look, I think until people are fired, you have no chance of getting things fired for failing to run the institution properly. It's not just about keeping the lights on, although it obviously is a biggie. But ensuring that there's adequate maintenance, ensuring that it's on some sort of paying basis. The rot, though, I think has gone so deep that that's a project of a decade, with the best will in the world. Now, well, let's hike electricity tariffs because all these naughty people are going off and putting their own generators in. That's like taking away our revenue. Solar panels. Yeah, solar panels. Sorry. You were an eco warrior hero a couple of years ago. You did this. Now apparently you're sabotaging the national development effort. there have to be proper consequences, but as Hermann says, your system actually has to be geared to functioning. So I don't see this working out until such time as you sort of start removing empowerment requirements for coal contracts and things like that. And that means instead you have to step away from the ideology, and I don't know, that's might well be the equivalent of trying to get a heroin addict, to give up his needle.
Right.
Yes, I can't remember the guy who spoke to us the other day, but he spoke to us about uncertainty and
Michael Glassland.
Yes, he said
and
a brilliant
thing. You can see a video
thing.
of him on the Center for Risk Analysis channel, which you should check out.
And he said a brilliant thing that I'd never thought of. I would like to convince myself that was my line of thinking, but it wasn't. The reason that the free market is a good idea is not because it has more, because we free marketeers aren't smarter or wiser. It's just the free market can experiment, and through the elimination of relatively minor failures, really come up with good solutions, where a state-managed approach is all eggs in one basket, where the market doesn't fall into that market, several chickens, several eggs, several baskets, and some of them will break and some of them will fail, and that's bad. And it's always sad when plans go asunder and businesses fail. But the main difference between the market and the state is the market can fail with limited destruction, where the state can only fail with ultimate destruction. And that's why we are pro-market, especially when it comes to Eskom, not because the market is beautiful and wonderful and will never do anything wrong. It's just when it does something wrong, it's not a holistic catastrophe. When the state does something wrong in a monopolist setup like Eskom, it is an utter and absolute disaster. But to end off this with I think it's James Myburgh who said, France quotes this regularly, is the ANC has done more damage to Eskom in government than when they did when their official policy was to sabotage it and bomb it as part of the armed struggle.
That's quite a sobering thought. Right, let us move on now to some important news. So yesterday, if you watched the show or you listened to the show, you will remember that we talked about expropriation without compensation, the bill that's been that's on the verge of being closed to public comment. Well, we've got some interesting developments in that sector. Hermann, tell us about what happened.
Yeah, so in short, and Terence is really one of the experts on this, so I'll keep it brief. In short, the deadline for comment on the expropriation bill would have been the 10th of February. Then yesterday, the parliamentary committee decided to make it the end of February, the 28th. And that's a positive development because it shows that pressure works. But if you want to understand why the bill is so dangerous, then Terence really is the guy to give that sort of insight.
Right, Terence, 90 seconds. Tell us your thoughts on this extension and the bill.
Well, fundamentally, expropriation is the process by which the state takes your stuff away. Now, this happens all over the world for various legitimate reasons. But what this bill does is it shifts that relationship entirely towards the state. So, for instance, although you do have recourse to the courts if your stuff is targeted, the Compensation and the Expropriation Act are delinked. So the government can take your stuff while that challenge is in process. You then face the prospect of having lost your property, of then having to contest it after the fact. Odds are then you'll settle with your own legal costs, and if you lose, possibly with the states as well. That's just one of a number of things. This is something to strengthen the government against the people, and it's actually dumbfounding how many people seem not to be able to understand this. And remember, it's a state we have, not the sort of Scandinavian, democratic welfare state of the imagination of some commentators.
Yes, as I believe our colleague Anthea Jeffrey has mentioned, there are municipalities, I believe, will have also the ability to expropriate. So you can see, for example, rural municipalities on maybe the KZN coast or something, eagerly looking at all of the holiday houses there and various investments and saying, I think we can take those. Lot of potential for very, very bad things to happen. Lots of corruption, lots of mismanagement. Anyway, please watch yesterday's episode for more information about how you can join our fight against that bill. And I think that's all the time we have for today. And that's the last episode of this week. Thank you very much for listening, watching. Please like us. Please share this video. Please share this podcast. Please leave us a review, 5-star review. And thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. And we will see you next week for another exciting edition of the Daily Friend Show. Have a great day, everyone.